Jatonya Muldrow was a police sergeant doing high-profile work with the FBI, driving an unmarked take-home car and working steady hours. Then one day, she was pulled off the assignment, handed a patrol schedule with weekends, and stripped of those perks. No change in pay or title. So is that discrimination? That was the question the United States Supreme Court faced, and they answered it on April 17th, 2024. So by the end of this video, you'll know how they ruled and whether a job transfer that keeps the same pay and title but strips away perks and opportunities can count as discrimination under Title VII. If you're an employee, you'll come away understanding your rights when it comes to transfers and assignments. And if you're an HR professional, you'll see why conducting investigations the right way is more important than ever. Informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional legal advice. Always consult with a qualified attorney or HR professional for specific guidance tailored to your needs. And hey, don't forget to like and subscribe. In 2008, Sergeant Jatonya Muldrow moved from patrol work into St. Louis Police Department's Intelligence Division. Over the years, she handled major cases like public corruption and human trafficking, led the gun crimes unit, and even supervised the gang unit. She worked a steady Monday through Friday schedule, and in 2016, the FBI deputized her as a task force officer on its human trafficking unit. That role came with real perks: out-of-uniform work, an unmarked FBI car, access to FBI databases, authority outside city limits, and the potential for up to $17,500 in overtime pay. But in 2017, when a new commander, Captain Deba, took over the Intelligence Division, things changed. He reshuffled staff, transferring multiple officers, including Sergeant Muldrow. She was reassigned to the 5th District, where she had to supervise patrol officers, approve arrests, and respond to high-level calls like homicides and robberies. Unlike her old job, she now worked rotating shifts, including weekends. She wore a full uniform and drove a marked car. Her pay stayed the same, but she lost the FBI role and the overtime opportunities that went with it. After her transfer, she held onto her FBI vehicle and credentials a bit longer, but was eventually told to turn them in. When she did, the FBI revoked her task force status. Soon after that, in June 2017, she filed a discrimination complaint with the Missouri Commission on Human Rights, arguing that she'd been targeted because of her gender. In the months that followed, Muldrow tried to transfer again, and she applied for positions in other divisions, including internal affairs, but before anything was finalized, she eventually returned to the Intelligence Division. In early 2018, with her FBI privileges reinstated, she later filed a lawsuit in state court against both the city of St. Louis and Captain Deba, claiming gender discrimination and retaliation. Now, you might be wondering, if Sergeant Muldrow was eventually sent back to the Intelligence Division and got her FBI privileges reinstated, why did she still sue? Well, the answer is this: reinstatement didn't erase the harm she'd already suffered. For months, she'd lost the prestige and authority that came with her FBI role, and she was working rotating shifts, weekends, in uniform, and she no longer had access to the same overtime or opportunities. And under Title VII, that period of disadvantage still matters. On top of that, once she filed her discrimination complaint, she also alleged retaliation. Now, if you've ever been in that position, you know how overwhelming it can feel to be confronted with retaliation. That's one of the reasons I created my retaliation workbook, to help people organize their evidence and feel a little more in control of the process. I will put the link for the workbook in the description. So even though she was eventually restored to her old position, the damage had already been done, and that's what her lawsuit was about. Now, in any discrimination case, an employee has to show harm. Without harm, there's no remedy, no compensation, no injunction, nothing the court can actually order. And that's exactly where St. Louis dug in its defense. Because the city argued that Sergeant Muldrow's pay never changed, her rank never changed, and that her transfer was simply part of a routine reshuffle when Captain Deba took over. As for losing her FBI credentials and privileges, they said that was just standard policy whenever an officer left the intelligence division. So, in the city's view, none of this added up to real discrimination because if she wasn't demoted, docked pay, or stripped of benefits, then she really hadn't suffered the kind of harm the law required. And the lower court agreed with the city of St. Louis, but Sergeant Muldrow didn't stop there. She took her fight to the appeals court, but the Court of Appeals also agreed with the district court. Still, Muldrow didn't stop. She took her fight to the United States Supreme Court, and they agreed to hear her case. And the Supreme Court ruled in Muldrow's favor. They basically said the lower courts got it all wrong because they were holding employees to the wrong standard. The lower courts insisted that Muldrow had to show a significant disadvantage to make her case. But the Supreme Court said no, that's not what Title VII requires. All the law says is that an employee can't be discriminated against with respect to the terms, conditions, or privileges of employment. That means it's enough to show some harm, like losing prestige, steady hours, or special assignments, even if pay and rank stay the same. So St. Louis had won this case on summary judgment, meaning the case never even made it to trial, but the Supreme Court reversed that, saying the wrong standard was used. So now the case goes back to the lower courts, and this time it has a real chance of reaching a jury. I'll be watching this case closely for updates. I'll make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Discrimination, it's not just about your compensation. If a transfer leaves you worse off in your schedule, your duties, or your opportunities, that can be enough to violate the law. For human resources and employers, that means investigations have to go deeper than surface level disparities like pay and job titles. Now, if you are responsible for investigating complaints, you now have to think about harm to employees in a broader way. And that's exactly why I created my investigation workbook for employers and HR professionals. It walks you step by step through the planning, interviewing, documenting, and evaluating claims process, through including subtle harms like the ones at the center of this case. Because if HR misses those, the company, the employer, could be exposed. I'll put the link to the workbook in the description. And I have to pause for a moment and thank those of you who have already purchased my workbooks. I am so grateful for your support. I've also received encouraging feedback that the tools I share here, from the training on Title VII protections, the quizzes and workbooks, are making a difference. That means a lot to me because I know how many people struggle with these issues. And if even one person can feel more equipped or supported because of the resources that are provided on this channel, then I know the work is worth it. This case shows us that discrimination doesn't always appear on the surface. Issues like dignity, unequal opportunities, or even the decline of everyday work conditions can all signal discrimination. And recognizing those more subtle forms of discrimination can be the key to protecting employees and safeguarding organizations against liability. Thanks so much for watching today. Whether you are an employee who is managing these challenges on your own or an employer working to address them responsibly, the more knowledge you have, the more confident you'll be in handling these situations. So remember, I have more videos on my channel about investigations, retaliation, and compliance. So be sure to check those out. And if this video helped you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and take a look at the description below for links to my workbooks and other resources. Till next time, this is Harlow. Take care.